Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang gunuttarang upajjayang namasami. Kalena dhamma savanang etang mangalam uttamanti. So, with the permission of the Sangha and my dear brothers, I'd like to offer a few thoughts for reflection, a few thoughts for consideration. So, today is the Uposatha. The bhikkhus observed the Uposatha in the morning, and at the end of it, there was the thought that another fortnight has gone by in the robes. And it was a very joyful thought. It was a very uplifting thought. It was a thought that brought up so much gratitude, so much love, so much happiness. And just like when we remind ourselves, even as bhikkhus or as bhikkhus when we observe the Uposatha, and either we chant the Patimokha or we observe our Parisuddhi, the same way as lay people when you take the 5 or the 8 precepts, it's not just a reminder for what we are committing ourselves to, but it's also a reminder for how we've been living our life. It's a reminder that for the past 2 weeks, we've been more or less living by the 8 precepts or living by the 5 precepts. And that's a very rare thing in this world. And that's something really worthy of celebration, really worthy of delighting in, really worthy of respecting, honoring. And so we did the observance, and then we got the news that Ajahn Jayasaro has received the title of Somdet Prarachakana, which is again a news of great delight and joy. It's a great recognition, it's a great honor. And so it fills the heart that, we have access to the words, teachings, experience, life lessons from all these wonderful teachers. It's a wonderful lineage, right? Lumpo Cha, Lumpo Liam, Lumpo Sumedo, Lumpo V, Ajahn Jaya, so many. Ajahn Amaro, Lumpo Suchito, Lumpo Pasanno. So many great teachers. And so we have to really take joy in that, and we have to allow that to bring in enthusiasm, bring in energy, bring in happiness, bring in love. And so I was recollecting some teachings of Ajahn Jaya, and one teaching of his came up in my mind, and he always lays great emphasis. He always says that the Buddha Dhamma, the Dhamma Vinaya, is an education system. It's a system of education, right? It's a system of learning and applying. Right? So he says, in the Buddha Dhamma, there's always these 4 levels of understanding. You have the Sotapanna, and you have the Sakadagami, and you have the Anagamin, and then you have the Arahant. And so Ajahn Jaya would always say that the Arahant is known as the Asekha, or the Asekha Puggala. That means someone who needs no more learning. right? He has learnt everything that needs to be learnt. There's nothing more to learn. Now the other three, the Anagaman, the Sakadagaman, and the Sotapanna, they are all called Sekapugalas. So the Arahant is the graduate, and then the Sakadagaman, the Anagaman, and the Sotapanna are learners. They are on the path. They are Sekapugalas. They are still learning. So here's the punchline. Ajahn Jaya then says, well, where does that leave us? It leaves us learning to learn. And that's beautiful. Right? We have to learn how to learn. Then we can learn. Then the learning comes to an end. And it's a beautiful way of putting it. It's a lovely way of viewing the Dhamma Vinaya, viewing the spiritual life. And then what it does is it brings in a lot of humility, right? Brings in not only humility, but commitment. And it brings in a little bit of ease. Yes, I'm a learner. I'm bound to make mistakes, right? I'm learning how to learn. So I'm bound to make mistakes, right? Creates a sense of ease. Then there's no kind of arrogance that can arise, right? You're learning to learn. That's what you're doing. So where's the point in being arrogant about anything? Some things may go well. That doesn't mean you have to be arrogant. Some things may go wrong. That doesn't mean you have to be dejected. Or that doesn't mean that, you need to beat yourself up on the head. And so this idea of learning how to learn also means that we have to unlearn, right? And then relearn. So that's very, very important too. How do we unlearn and relearn? Well, what do we unlearn and relearn? Well, how we unlearn and relearn is through the process of humility, through the process of surrender, through the process of observation, through the process of awareness, through the process of imbibing. And so when you look at these aspects, the role of the ego there is minimal. The role of Amarasiri Bhikkhu as a person having all these qualities or as a person not having all these qualities is actually, it really doesn't matter at that point, right? Past conditioning, we learn how to observe all this. We learn how to objectify all this, and then we start learning. Then what is it that we have to unlearn? Well, what we have to unlearn is our habits, thoughts, tendencies that we bring in from our material world. And somehow, out of habit, we start applying the same things to our spiritual life or to our spiritual world. Right? So in the material world, this notion of doing, achieving, acquiring, all of these things are very much needed in the material world. When we are dealing with mundane things, we very much have to come from that mind state, setting things right, doing, achieving, finishing, all of these things. But then in the spiritual life, that is not the way. Those are actually hindrances to the spiritual life. So the first point of kind of unlearning, or the first point of learning how to learn, would be, or as it seems to me, would be this idea of actually trying to approach the spiritual life from a different mind state, from a different mindset, viewing it through a different lens, applying different values to it. And to help in that process, the Buddha has set up this Noble Eightfold Path. Right? The beginning of it, which is Sammaditthi, or Samma Drishti, Samyak Drishti in Sanskrit. Ditti, Drishti is vision. It's the direction you're setting for your life. Where is my life going? Why am I here? What am I doing? Right? And the Buddha says, well, what you need to do is move away from suffering and move towards happiness. Right? So that is the vision that we adopt in this spiritual life. That is the direction we set for ourselves. Right? Constantly moving away from suffering towards happiness, towards peace, towards contentment. And this method of doing that is through dana, sila, and bhavana. Right? So very often people come to the monastery with the expectation that they want to be better meditators. That's a noble aspiration, but this idea of being a better meditator, if it is constantly defined by a kind of technique-oriented, achievement-oriented, grasping-oriented approach, right? Then I think we are missing the point. So for me, the way I look at it is that my life under Lumpo's guidance and my life as a monk, I don't think I'm a very great meditator, but what has happened is that my heart has opened. And I think because of that, my meditation seems pleasant, seems peaceful. So instead of making our spiritual life or making our role in the monastery a role of constantly bettering ourselves, or a role of constantly becoming a better meditator, or getting rid of all my bad habits, or constantly correcting, probably a relearning, right, would be to look at the opening of the heart. And so, very often, when people say, my meditation is horrible, perhaps we have to look at the other two aspects of this life. If bhavana is weak, we have to look at dana and sila. If sila is weak, we have to look at bhavana and dana. If dana is weak, we have to look at sila and bhavana. So I was reminded of how Tanagga went to the chiropractor thinking he had a knee problem, but all the while the problem was in his lower back, right? So where the problem appears is probably not the place that needs treatment. It's something else that needs treatment. So if our mind is constantly agitated and if we are not able to collect ourselves, then why not put in effort into these aspects of dana and sila and then see what happens to bhavana? That is a unlearning and a relearning, right? Because immediately we identify a problem is with my knee. So I put a poultice on my knee, or I put an ointment on my knee, or I want to make my knee better, and I'm constantly focusing on the knee, whereas the problem is actually in my back, right? So someone comes and tells you, hey, look, the problem's not with your knee, the problem's with your back or your hip, and then wow, okay, this is what's happening. Right? So in the same way, if my heart doesn't get collected during meditation, then I should figure out what is affecting it, right? So if a farmer wants to grow the best mangoes, right, he shouldn't be poking at the mango to make it better. He should actually be working with the soil. He should add manure to the soil. He should make sure the tree is protected. And of course, the seed has to be good. That is a given. The seed has to be good. But then all the effort, if you notice, for farmers who want to have a good harvest, all the effort goes into these other areas, making sure there's water, making sure the soil is good, making sure that the crops are protected while they grow. Right? So these are the aspects of dana and sila that we focus on in order to ensure that bhavana happens properly, appropriately, joyfully, delightfully, with ease, with calm. So then when we often, again, coming back to this idea of learning how to learn, we look at dana and we say, okay, I have to be generous. I have to be generous, right? Yes, of course, dana means that you have to be generous. But another way of looking at dana is to actually, how can I be generous? I can be generous only when I have cultivated abundance within myself. Unless I have and I feel and I come and I live and I bathe in this feeling of abundance, my dana is not going to be optimal. So then it's important to look at how do I create a sense of abundance within myself. And the Buddha says you have to look at two aspects. Lobha, which is greed, and Macharia, or Matsarya in Sanskrit, which is stinginess, right? So greed, and it's important to understand this. We're not trying to attack this kind of, or we're not trying to be warriors who want to do dana, but we're actually approaching this from the viewpoint of a student who says, how can I make my dana better? How can I get this feeling of abundance? And hence we look at certain factors that are not conducive to this feeling of abundance. And another kind of, we'll come back to this, but an offshoot is that when we look at the word bhikkhu in Pali or bhikshu in Sanskrit, the commentaries give two explanations. The first explanation is bhayam mikkatiti bhikkhu, one who acts out of a sense of caution, one who's fearful of wrongdoing, right? Is considered a bhikkhu. The other explanation is subikkhati iti bhikkhu or subikshati iti bhikshu. So this idea of subiksha or subikha, which is abundance, which is a sense of, a very deep sense of contentment, right? Subikshati iti bhikkhu, and that really appeals to me. Where a bhikkhu is a bhikkhu only if he feels abundant, only if he feels a deep sense of contentment. And in that deep sense of contentment lies the Brahma Viharas. Right? So anyway, coming back to Lobha and Macharia, it actually needs a bit of a kind of neural rewiring, because as human beings, as animals, we are kind of biologically wired this way. So instead of saying, oh, lobha, I'm a greedy person, right? We look at where this lobha comes from, or where this greed comes from. And this greed comes from a fear of lack. Or this greed comes from an aversion to the feeling of lack. Right? And so someone who's greedy will automatically try and accumulate more and more and more because they don't want to feel this sense of lack. But it comes with an added layer. So I keep accumulating. I try to get over the sense of lack, but then another voice arises in my mind. Yes, I've accumulated all this. Now what if I lose it? Right? That is Macharia or Matsarya. This fear of scarcity. So you have a fear of lack, or we have a fear of lack, and then it gets compounded by a fear of scarcity. Oh, if I give, or if I share, whatever I've collected is going to diminish. But then what we forget is that actually it's not diminishing, it's multiplying, just in another form. Right? So you have material requisites and you give it. What you get in return is happiness, is contentment, is joy. Not just that, we actually move away from grasping. And that is the strength of dana. So every time I'm able to let go of something material, right, I'm actually weakening my tendency to grasp. And that's huge. That's huge. That's where the neural rewiring works. And then when I look at Macharia and I say, oh my God, I have this, I have to protect this, it shouldn't become less. Then I realize, oh no, if I share this, I'm actually getting a lot more back. Because the whole point of accumulating and protecting is for the sake of happiness. We forget that. And then we start accumulating and we start protecting just for the sake of having that item. A good example is money. Why do we need money? We need money actually just to make sure our life is okay. Just to make sure that we get what we need. Right? But people forget that. And they just start hoarding money. Right? And this idea of hoarding money is actually, especially for those who are in the spiritual path, what it does is it reinforces the sense of I and the sense of mine, and it reinforces my biological urge to grasp, to hold, to collect, to multiply, to grow, and not use it, not get any benefit out of it. Right? Then there's no point. So there's this lovely story, and so, you know, Tansri Medo was reminding me about Scrooge, the story of Scrooge. But there's and I'm sure everyone is familiar with the story of Scrooge, but there's exactly the same kind of story that's mentioned in the Dhammapada and in the Jataka tales. And it's about this person called Macharia Kosia. Okay, Kosia is his name, and he's given the title Macharia because he's extremely stingy. Right? Matsarya, Macharia. So this Kosia lives in a village called Sakkara, which is right next to Rajagaha. And he's the king's treasurer, right? So obviously he's got to be really wealthy. And he lives in this 7-floor mansion. He's got lots and lots of wealth, but he lives like Scrooge. So one day, this desire comes up in him to have pancakes, apuppa in Pali. It's quite delicious. You grind rice flour, and then you add sugar, and then you add ground cashew nuts, and then you cook it in ghee, and then you fill it with grated coconuts and jaggery. It's actually quite delicious. So anyway, he wanted to have that. But then he thought, oh my God, how much money is it going to take? Right? Got to spend money on ghee and spend money on sugar and coconut and jaggery and cashew nuts. No, it's too much. I don't want to spend. So he just keeps thinking about it all the time without putting in any effort or spending any money to actually get it. And because of that, he starts getting really grumpy and grouchy and kind of always ill at ease. And his wife notices this, right? And his wife goes to him and says, what's bothering you? Tell me. And he says, I feel like having a pupa. So the wife says, what's the big deal? I'll make enough apupa for the whole street. And then he says, no, please don't do that. No. And then the wife says, okay, then just for the family. He says, no, too many people. So the wife says, okay, just for you and me. He says, no, absolutely not. Then the wife says, okay, just for you. He says, okay, maybe just a little bit, right? Just a little bit. Just for me. So we'll go up to the 7th floor of our mansion, we'll shut all the doors, and you bring a stove, and you bring all of these things, and then you cook this, and we'll shut off all the windows so that the neighbors don't smell, and then I'll eat it really quickly. So the wife says, she doesn't like it, but okay, what's the point in having a grumpy husband? Bad enough having a stingy husband. Might as well, keep him a little happy. So she says, okay, we'll do it. So they go up to their 7th floor, they shut all the windows, and she makes the batter, and she's about to start making these pancakes, these apupas. When the Buddha is able to discern what's going on, and he sends Mahamogallana. He tells Mahamogallana, go, this is what's going on, and bring them here, before the meal time. So as the wife is ready to start making the apupas, Mahamogallana appears outside the window of the 7th floor mansion, and the window opens, and Kosia looks outside the window, and there's Mahamogallana suspended in midair. Now Kosia gets really angry. Oh my God, I've made all these arrangements. I'm just about to eat, and I don't want to share this with anyone. And here's this monk. Now he's come. Now I have to offer him. Right? And this is just horrible. So he tells his wife, make the smallest pancake that you can. Right? And then we'll offer it to this monk. The monk will go away. So first he tells Mogallana, go away, there's no food. There's no, why have you come here? Mogallana is just standing there, he's not moving. And then finally he tells his wife, okay, make the smallest pancake. So the wife takes a little bit of batter, puts it into the pan, and magically this little bit of batter fills the whole pan and becomes a whole pancake. Right? Now this guy is totally angry with his wife, and he says, no, you put all this batter, that's why this pancake has become so big. So he says, keep it aside, and he takes a speck of batter and puts it in the pan, and magically it converts itself into a full-size pancake. So he gets really, really annoyed now. So he tells the wife, okay, finish the batter, and then we'll give this monk one pancake, he'll go away, I'll eat the rest. Probably there was enough batter for 3 or 4 pancakes, right? So the wife finishes making all the pancakes, and it's in this vessel that she keeps. And Kosia now tells his wife, okay, give this monk one pancake. And the wife is trying to, remove one pancake, and all of them are stuck together. Now this, she just can't. So this guy, now he's trying his level best to separate the pancakes, right? He's pulling and he's tugging and he tells his wife, okay, you hold one end, I'll hold the other. They're pulling. These pancakes just don't separate. So now he's sweating and he's hungry and he's angry. And so finally he says, give the whole thing to that monk, let him eat. And, the wife gives it to Mahamoggalana, and Mahamoggalana then says, well, actually, I'm not here to eat your pancakes. I'm here to take you to go see the Buddha. So using his psychic powers, he takes Kosia, his wife, and that entire setup, right, to Savatthi, Jetavana, where the Buddha is. And the Buddha then tells him that, he gives him a teaching on dana and talks to him about lobha, talks to him about Macharia, explains to Kosia all the different methods by which lobha and Macharia affect a person's desire to give or to share. And now Kosia and his wife are so elated, so joyful. They tell the Buddha, take the whole thing, please. This is our offering to you. We offer it out of great happiness and joy. So the Buddha, there are 500 monks there in the Sangha, and the Buddha just keeps taking pancakes out of the vessel and it never extinguishes. So all of them are fed, all of them eat however much they want. Kosia eats, Kosia's wife eats, and there's no end to the pancakes. And the Buddha tells him, it's because of the sense of abundance with which you gave that this is now an inexhaustible resource, right? So you gave with abundance, and we accepted it with abundance. Now everyone is eating abundantly. So when we look at dana, or when we try and approach dana, or when we are trying to inculcate this parami of dana, this dana parami, it's important to kind of figure out where are the sticking points, right? Do I have a fear of lack? Do I have a fear of scarcity? Am I not able to see that there is abundance in giving, right? Because whatever we may collect in this lifetime, whether it's money, whether it's fame, whether it's a huge family or huge businesses, after we die, we can't take it anywhere. We can't take it with us. It's just left for those, and all we turn into is either a pile of ashes or a little grave, right? That's it. At the end of our life, that's it. But what we can do is utilize all these things to convert it to punya, right? And so you may say, well, and then you can take it to a next life. So you can say, well, I don't believe in a next life. Well, it manifests even this very life, right? Give with happiness, give with joy, and then actually feel the result of giving with that happiness and in that joy, right? And then we can experience that heavenly state right here and now. So whether you believe in rebirth or you don't believe in rebirth, dana is good. Dana is absolutely beneficial. So then, the Buddha also says, and he tells Kosia this, that, if you have lots of money, you have to do lots of dana. If you have a moderate amount of money, do dana moderately. If you have very little money, give little bit, right? But there is no excuse for not giving. Absolutely no excuse for not giving. And that's very, very important. Not out of a sense of an ego promotion or some kind of technique of self-aggrandizement. It is more out of this actually wholesome inclination of letting go of this very natural habit, this very natural tendency of grasping, holding on, hoarding, accumulating, and then the fear that arises out of losing it. Right? And at the same time, to grow this feeling of abundance, to grow this feeling of there is a lot here, and when I give, I get more. Right? So that's about dana. And then about sila, very often we kind of view sila as a set of rules, right? So you have either the 5 or the 8 or the 10 or the 227 or the 311. And so those are the sikkhapadas. And for the bhikkhus, we have the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, we have the patimokkha. But just like for us, how the patimokkha is a small part of vinaya, the same way the sikkhapadas are a small part of sila. What do I mean by that? Well, one example is, I was mentioning this at the retreat, how Lumpur Cha would always say, right but not true. Or sometimes true but not right. Right? And very often we approach sila in that manner, in a very prescribed, inflexible manner, and we forget to view the holistic picture. So let's say Yom Toy prepares a delicious meal, right? And then offers it to all of us, and we eat it. Then at the end of the meal, Yom Toy comes to me and says, "Oh, how was the meal?" Now let's say I didn't like it, right? This is just an example. I love your cooking, right? So let's say I didn't like it, but I have this precept that I have to be completely honest, right? And I tell Yom Toy, "Nah, I didn't like it at all. The food was horrible." I'm protecting my sikkhapada, but I'm harming my sila, right? I'm harming my sila because I'm hurting someone who has done something with a lot of love. And so that's true, but it's not right. So the other example is, if we live in an area which is infested by malarial mosquitoes, or we live in an area and suddenly there's an infestation of these malarial mosquitoes, what do? Do we protect ourselves and our family? Or do we have to say, no, my precept is the precept of non-killing, right? Now that's very good. And we have to take that up. We have to take up that stance. Having taken up that stance, we then have to figure out how we protect the family as well. So again, looking at sila in a very tight mindset, with a very tight mindset, and looking at it in just one kind of angle, there's a risk that the sila itself will turn into silavatta paramasa. Right? And so how do we avoid that? Well, to avoid that, basically when we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, there's Samma Ditti, and then there is the sila element, Samma Vacha, Samma Ajiva, Samma Kammanta. Right in the middle is wedged this jewel, this gem called Samma Sankappa, Samyak Sankalpa, right inclination, right commitment, right intention. And if we approach our practice of the sikkhapadas, or if we approach our practice of the sila constantly from this attitude of Samma Sankappa, we are absolutely safe, completely. Because what is Samma Sankappa? First is Nikkama Sankappa, then is Avihingsa Sankappa, then is Avyapajya Sankappa. Right? So, Nikkama Sankappa. Nikkama is the Pali word, and usually this is translated as letting go. Right? But what is it? What does it mean? So, Nikkama in Pali is Naishkramya in Sanskrit. So the word krama means an order, a sequence, a progression. And Nikkama or Naishkramya is just going against that order or that progression. Right? And so what is the progression? Progression is, I see something that I really like, I immediately want to grab it. Right? I grab it and I use it, and then I feel I'm satisfied for a little while, and then I feel a lack again. So instead of that, observing it, we are actually now saying, okay, this is the krama, this is the kama. Now I'm doing nikkama, I'm doing naishkramya, I'm going against the sequence, I'm going against this order. So when desire arises, we view desire, allow it to manifest with its full force, and neither give in nor oppose. Right? And allow it to pass away. It will pass away. It will lose its energy. Nikkama Sankappa. Avihingsa Sankappa, very easy. This attitude of non-harming. Right? No harm. No harm to myself, no harm to others. Avyapajya Sankappa, non-alienation, never rejecting. Right? There's no me and you, there's only us. Right? So if we are able to bring in this idea of Samma Sankappa, these attitudes of Nikkama, Avihingsa and Avyapajya, then there is always this guarantee that not only will our Sila remain pure and intact, but the Sila itself becomes a great source of joy. Now, another way Dana affects Sila is that by nature, what Dana is doing is that it is loosening our grip on grasping. So as this grasping tendency gets loosened, then now I don't have to worry about stealing. Then when I have tendencies of avihingsa and avyapajja, I don't have to worry about harming or hurting or killing. I don't have to worry about sexual misconduct. I don't have to worry about deceit. Right? So then, this is how we look at Sila and we learn how to learn. Okay, Sila is not just this. Sila is not just keeping the 8 precepts or 5 precepts, biting my teeth and grinding my teeth and saying, this is it and this is how. No, you have to go a little deeper. And you have to understand what are the tendencies in me that are not allowing these things to be optimized. Right? And then bhavana. So if we come from a heart that is completely filled with abundance, filled with love, filled with care, filled with concern, and our conduct is pure, it comes from the conduct, comes from the attitude of letting go, comes from the attitude of non-harming, non-alienation, then automatically there is no other choice. Our hearts will have to collect. Right? So then when we deal with people, our life becomes beautiful, our transactions become meaningful, our life has a sense of purpose. And then when we sit down on the cushion, close our eyes, meditation happens automatically. Right? No need to fight. And Lumpur V always has this wonderful, wonderful saying that stays with me, has stayed with me, will continue staying with me. He says, contentment with little is countercultural. Because the world teaches us not to be content. The world teaches us that we have to keep doing, keep achieving, keep accumulating. That is how success is defined in the world. But in the spiritual life, we are going against that krama, going against that order, going against that progression. And we say, no, contentment with little. Like Lumpucha would always say, eat little, sleep little, talk little, meditate a lot, right? So the meditation will automatically happen. Then the meditation will become completely natural. Whether we are talking with each other, whether we are eating, whether we are bathing, whether we are sitting down with our legs crossed, closing our eyes, whether we are doing walking meditation, lying down meditation, doesn't matter. Meditation happens automatically. The supports that make it happen are these tendencies and attitudes. And this is what we have to learn how to learn. So I leave these thoughts for your consideration. And if there was anything useful, please take it, apply it. If there was anything not useful or wrong, I ask for your apologies.
Andamayang awada dhamma kataya sadhu karang dhamma se. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.